In episode 4 of season 2 of Severance, we got to see the Gathering going on their first or bow, and with the episode being named WO's Empty, I was considering what this portion would bring, yet much to our dismay that Wo's Empty would really be an area around the bend from where Kia's twin sibling Da spilled his heredity on the dirt. There's something that simply has a so filthy outlook on that line. It really made me laugh uncontrollably during having the option to Seabird, and he had that dejection and void that was consuming him. So in addition to the fact that he considered this to be an approach to having the option to get turned off, yet it was likewise an approach to revealing reality. Way back in episode 1, Irving was expecting to be dove into that murkiness, so maybe he got what he needed. He found a sense of contentment with it as he shut his eyes and tuned in. As Mr. Milch said, "Your work area will be cleared, any private things disposed of your document, including all expert and individual cooperations, will be cleansed and obliterated. It will be as though you, Irving, be never existed, nor drew a solitary breath upon this world." It's depressing. I know, yet, deciding by what Milch said, I keep thinking about whether Lumen likely could have the option to change the recollections of the Eenies and keep them from having significant familiarity with Irving. That is one approach to possibly decipher what Milch said. However, notwithstanding he condemned Irving B to death, and it really felt like we were seeing an all-time execution, the difference in Imprint and Heli, as opposed to Irving A, found in this EP episode, which was so perfectly developed, and I just saw the excellence of it towards the end, was the scene where Imprint and Heli were getting physically involved with each other, and it was continually being connected with and was associated with the location of Irving, meandering through the timberland in obscurity, where he ultimately laid his head down on a stone and rested. For the night, I was so confounded at first regarding the reason why the two scenes were interconnected. However, the more it went on, the variety distinction in the scenes and the manner in which it closed showed the distinction with Imprint and Heli. There was a warm orange tint that gave that of warmth, and they were in a deterred space, which likewise added to the closeness that was there between them, adding the way that they don't have anything on, and they couldn't be nearer to one another. It showed the harmony and feeling that was available when you're with someone that you care about. With Irving, it was the direct inverse. As Hello said, he was acting how he was on the grounds that he realized that he was at absolutely no point ever going to see Bert in the future, and he was grieving the person that had succumbed to while working at Lumen. And this was an inclination that had been available inside Irving for a large portion of the time. So with him meandering through the backwoods in obscurity, it featured precisely that. It was cold. There was no light, and there was an emphasis on the immense open scene that was around him, showing that he was in isolation. This truly caught the inclination that Irving had within him, with how he was feeling about birds, yet with him, likewise saying that he nearly stuck to death. That was again the direct inverse to what we saw with Heli and Mark. The contrast was obvious, and I thought it was a smart idea in the manner that it was conveyed. It showed us how each of the three of those characters were feeling at that time, according to a visual point of view, the variety distinction in the outfits. One thing that I feel hung out in this episode was the shade of the outfits that the MDR representatives were wearing. And furthermore, the outfits that Millie and Miss Swang were wearing, they were basically precisely the same. Yet, the main fundamental contrast was in the tones dark for Imprint, Helena Irving, and Dylan, and white for Milch and Miss Wang. At first, I was attempting to attract various associations concerning why it would resemble that, whether it was only a prevalence thing. Yet I feel like, at the center of this episode, there were strict subjects, particularly with the connection to what could be viewed as Kay's starting point in him restraining tempers, interestingly. So, in taking a gander at how the varieties are, much of the time utilized in the Book of Scriptures, white is frequently used to represent sacredness and exemplary nature, and dark is frequently supposed to be associated with haziness, sin, and the results of resistance. This is the kind of thing that I feel you could see inside these characters. For instance, with Mr. Milch and Miss Hang, they were two people that are more senior than the individuals in MDR, and you could contend are nearer to the lessons of Kier Eagan, so they've procured the option to be in white, though the MDR group being in dark, and having recently been known to renegade, despite everything be searching for more profound responses, that is practically emblematic of the variety that they're wearing. They were setting out on this excursion, which was driving them to the Fourth, supplement the text that KIA reviewed right until the second, that he kicked the bucket at last, permitting them to continue in the strides of the twins, nearly showing that this was their excursion to be edified and to have faith in Kism considerably more. They were in dark, since they were at this point to feel the uprightness and sacredness of the Eagan cold. So I feel like that is presumably why there was a distinction in the shade of the dress that they were wearing, more associations with the good book, as well as the shade of the outfits. It seemed like there were a couple different associations with the book of scriptures. In this episode, for instance, the gathering being placed on this excursion was something that felt like it was unloaded to empower them to feel nearer to the pioneer behind Lumen Eagan, something that felt like it was reflecting Jesus going on excursions all through the Holy Book to draw nearer to God. Another way I feel it associated was the way that the handbook was nearly being dealt with, like it was a book of scriptures. It was thought of and broadly perceived that each word was reality anyway. Any semblance of Imprint and Helena were deciphering it to be something else entirely. It's generally expected, said that the book of scriptures, since it's so old, the words and stories can be deciphered in various ways, and certain things are deciphered as representations. So what it seemed like this was showing us considerably more was that Eagan was considered to be this genuine figure among those that decided to trust the words, as crazy as Section 1 in the fourth appendix, in spite of the fact that I would agree that Kia and the stealing babysitter seemed like it might have been a convincing understood. Helena didn't have any desire to leave. There was a second in this episode that I believed was truly significant, and it associated back to what we found in episode 2 of the show, and it additionally affirmed why it was that Imprint and Helena were getting it on. While in the tea in episode 2 of season 2, we saw that Helena was nearly charmed by the relationship that her innie had with Imprint. At first I thought it was essentially envy, yet the more I watched her, the more I felt like there was a fundamental feeling of envy there. However, she was additionally in grieving. It felt like she was grieving the sensation of vacancy that she had, while outwardly she'd essentially been without any trace of adoration and had never truly had a personal connection with anyone as an AI. So by seeing that her innie had gone through and encountered an inclination that she hadn't encountered in her 30-odd years in the world, I envision. It eventually made her need to have the option to encounter that very thing. We additionally saw her say to Stamp, I could do without, who I'm outwardly, this was deciphered by markers, that disliking what she saw, in any case. I think there was genuine truth behind what Helena was talking about. I don't really think she loves the existence that she has the tensions of being James Egan's little girl and what her everyday life is comprised of. I don't be guaranteed to think the ethical side is something that she thinks about that amount or weighs weighty at the forefront of her thoughts. Yet I feel it's all the more an egotistical explanation. It's the void and depression that her work drives her to have. That is presumably why she consented to go in there, and it's presumably why she got physically involved with Imprint, since she got to encounter the very sentiments that she never had. Before this suggests an enormous conversation starter for the future. However, Helena currently has a unique interaction with all of those characters. She was one of them for a brief time, and she was likewise a partner to them, just like she was their boss. In addition to, I envision she has a close-to-home association with Imprint now as well. Not terrible, but not great either. I keep thinking about whether that fair-minded relationship that she's presently going to have will influence how the gathering is dealt with pushing ahead, or, on the other hand, assuming that it will influence their RTIs at all, Imprint's reintegration. Incidental effects. A significant scene that happened in this episode was that when Imprint and Helena were getting physically involved with each other, Imprint's vision was nearly misfiring before him, and Helena transformed into Miss Casey S.L. Gemma directly before his eyes, before it returned. This most probable happened in light of the fact that it very well may be a result of the reintegration cycle that he underwent in the past episode, something that wasn't exactly addressed that much